Hey, Shalom Akim, Shalom, 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 Akim, Yahweh, Bashim, Shah, Barakatam, Bashim, Kalkadash, the bonus and salutations to the elders and apostles of Grimstone, Rural Spram Nashad, DC Camp, the beta lesson for the hopeful elect. But at the same time, you have to rejoice that prophecy has to take place. All right, so we understand that unemployment rate is a metric of how well a country's economy is functioning. And now you have all these tens of thousands, let's say hundreds of thousands of graduates from these universities, even high schools also, that are dealing with poor outlook. All right, they have a very, 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 very diminished outlook of being employed. They have all type of barriers now since the elites have decided that they've had enough of all these employees, man. That it's time for the so-called fifth industrial revolution. So they don't want to longer depend on heavily on physical labor. They want to use AI. That's the challenge that they have to come face to face with. All right. So it's just how Esau is, man. When you read the script from the Georgia Guidestones, they have to have control over the population of people. When you ask Trump about the well-being of the American people, here's what he said. Say, well, they're not really a priority. That we have better things to take care of. So it's just how it is. The rich has always been against the poor. And it's just how it is. The poor is basically a commodity that is disposable. A disposable commodity. You know, when they have no need for the person, you just get rid of them. Just like how Esau used to treat Jakes. During the time of hardcore slavery, during the early stages. Who work a Jake to death. You know, no mercy, no sustainability. That's what Esau has has become. So I get a quick precept. This is from the book of Proverbs, chapter 12 and 10. It says, "A righteous man regarded the life of his beast, but the tender mercies of the wicked are cruel." Okay, that's why you have so many people protesting for a living wage. All right, on a so-called daily basis. Why? Because of inflation. Esau is messing around with the value of the currency. You know, he's using the system to strip the people of their earning potential. And then he attacks them with toxins introduced into the environment, you know, during his manufacturing process. And then what does he also do? Uh, Defective medication that causes people to be sick and have all type of negative side effects. Yeah, and he poisons the mind of the people with his junk science, with his junk philosophy and all that stuff, and his council culture. So, how do you expect people to operate efficiently when the so-called leader is actually a terrorist. So I played the video.
So 60% of last year's college graduates have still not landed an entry level role. And I get a lot of flack for this, but I graduated in 2008 and it was hard to graduate at that time and find a job. But what you could do, at least at the time, was find a bullshit job. A job that paid you very little or you worked on tips, a job that you could just find on Craigslist and you would send your resume, or you wouldn't even send a resume, and you would just email an AOL or Hotmail account and meet up with the person, have a conversation, and if you have some personality, be able to convince them to give you a. The problem now is that even bullshit jobs are hard to find. Very hard to find. Not only that, it's like they've made bullshit jobs very hard to apply for. Like you have to fill out this crazy application for minimum wage. And, you hear about people all the time on this app that are applying to food service jobs. They're college graduates. They're applying for food service. And they're not even getting a call. They're applying to minimum wage.
Yeah, that's one thing I had to deal with, man, when I graduated from college, man. If you know the number of brothers in this truth with degrees, oh boy, you'll be surprised. But that's just how the Lord operates, man. You have to accept how the Lord has orchestrated the journey of His servants, the prophet, man. You have to understand why the Lord said things this way, because every time we spent on that system of Esau did not really bring us close to our salvation. It's basically a wedge, that separates you from the Lord because you're trying to fit yourself, into Esau's system. And then what happens? You become a tool for Esau. You become a tool to for Esau's empire. You basically fuel for Esau's empire. All right. So, 1 Corinthians 1 and 21. For after that, in the wisdom of Yahweh, the world by wisdom knew not Yahweh. It pleased Yahweh by Shemashai, by Shemukakadash, by the foolishness of preaching to save them that believe. Yeah, so the Lord had to draw us out of darkness. Because Esau's system is all darkness, man. You cannot depend on it for your livelihood. You cannot depend on it for your salvation. So you're basically making yourself a slave to foolishness, man. The foolishness of Esau. So that's the reason why you have to tell it to the word of the Lord. You have to understand the challenges you have to deal with. Yeah, the foolishness of preaching the gospel of the Lord. In this world, man, when you're serving the Lord, you think that you're just wasting your time. But when you get delivered from this confusion, you understand exactly how the Lord operates. So Esau's system is built on foolishness, man. That's why when you read the book of Sirach, chapter 4 and 27, it says, make not thyself an underling to a foolish man, neither accept the person of the mighty. So, It's just words of advice from the Lord, man. Esau's system is nothing but folly. So you have to accept, the bitterness of this gospel. It's basically to warn you, to prepare you for the chaos that's coming ahead. You know, you can have all the trinkets of this society, but when you don't have that spiritual foundation, that spiritual grounding, you're basically a lost soul, man, a lost sheep, a lost sheep. That's why the Spirit of the Lord had to go out there, man, because when you depend on the Lord, man, when the Lord knows that you really depend on him, you're sincere, he will always bring you out of that predicament you're in, So that's why you have to acknowledge him, man. And you read Matthew chapter 10, uh, 5 and 6. These 12 Yahushua sent forth and commanded them, saying, Go not in the way of the Gentiles, and into any city of the Samaritans enter ye not, but go rather to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. And as ye go, preach, saying, The kingdom of heaven is at hand. So when you understand the mission of the Lord Amashak Yahushai, you begin to withdraw yourself psychologically from depending on Esau, completely. You have that withdrawal, your interest in Esau's system begins to fade away, and that's why Esau is not happy. When he sees that you're no longer entwined with his system, he gets irritated. Your awakening is happening. When the spirit of life, enters into you, what do you think Esau is upset about, man? He gets nervous. He gets nervous when you're no longer conforming to his agenda. You're beginning to embrace your identity as an Israelite. That's what Esau, always does, man. He wants to use his system as a barrier between you and the Lord. He doesn't want you to draw nigh to the Lord, so he uses his system as an obstacle. When you think you're progressing, you're basically falling away from the light, falling away from the knowledge of the Lord Hamashak Yahushai. Alright? So the book of Romans chapter 12 and 2, it says, and be not conformed to this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind. So you have to start afresh for you to move in the correct direction. And when you begin to change your direction, Esau notices it, man. And then he sees the effects. He begins to see the light of your mind beginning to shine. All of a sudden, he has to go back to the drawing board to prevent you from progressing further. All right, that ye may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of Yahweh Shema Shai Shema Kadash. So you have to understand, man. So all these folks, man, that are not happy, that they cannot get a job they've applied for, that they really, really want, hey, it's just, the bitterness they have to deal with, man, So that's why it's necessary, you counteract that feeling of defeat, with the wisdom of the Lord, man. It's not everything that you studied for in college, that you went to you went to trade school for, that you be able to apply when you're out there on the plantation. So you have to acknowledge that part, man. You might be able to set up a business, but then the business doesn't move forward because things happen. Things happen in this captivity. So the Lord wants you to do something different. So yeah, just prepare yourself, man. Spiritually, you don't get stuck depending upon Esau's system. You know, yeah, thinking that you will be made whole. There is no remedy. You know, believing that Esau's system is gonna get you everything you need. All right. Yeah. So that's all you have to remember, man. So sadness, man. These people are upset. They're strung out on medication. So you have to be careful out there, man.
Call centers, and they're not getting a call back. So you have to understand that the economic environment right now, the jobs market, is much more difficult because one, offshoring has moved a lot of jobs overseas that a lot of entry level college graduates would normally get. And now,
Yeah, and that's what Esau does, man. When it decided to move those manufacturing jobs overseas, it left a lot of neighborhoods, a lot of cities and towns in the Midwest. It left them destitute. You can look at Detroit. You can look at Ohio. When you watch those B-rated Hollywood movies, man, you could see how that how places become the rusting belt. All these so old steel mills and all that stuff just going down the crapper industrial zones, just laying dormant, abandoned factories and all that, abandoned buildings, abandoned towns, you know, abandoned neighborhoods. That's what happens when Esau pools his economic resources, and then the laborers don't have a recourse, man. They have to go find something else to do, and that's what Esau did. Because when I was wrapping up, finishing in college, they're already making plans. In fact, they're already moving jobs overseas to India. That's exactly what they wanted to do. What else? HP, Microsoft, Oracle Sun, um, you name it, man. Yeah, you name it. They did everything in their power to move those jobs overseas. So by the time you go for the job interview, you realize that you're going to be working with teams from across the pond, across the Indian Ocean. You know, so you have to understand that it's basically the cutting costs. That's just what it is, man. When you hear about companies like Infosys, back then you realize it was done deliberately. That's exactly the tool of Esau to break the backs of the people that he wants them under his thumb. So when you understand that all you can do is just pray to the Lord that He gives you the patience and the skill and the faith to endure, that you'll be fine in the long run, man. Because this is not our rest. When you read the book of Micah chapter 2 and 10, you have to accept it, man. Micah 2 and 10, arise ye and depart, for this is not your rest, because it is polluted, it shall destroy you, even with the soil destruction. A lot of people are crying. They're upset that they cannot get a meaningful job. They've applied for so many jobs that they cannot even get a call back, man. So it's rough. It's rough. Yeah. So whatever skills you've had, don't take it for granted. Is what I use. Because I work in security. Even though I have a background in computer science and all that stuff, those skills still come in handy. It's like what you're good at. You have to add something to it. So you just don't want to be one track minded. You have to have skills to deal with it. If you're a man, you have to study some topics in security. You know, and security is not just one sector of the economy. You got security for educational systems, security for real estate, security for industrial facilities, security for healthcare. So you have to combine everything you know. That's how you become the complete package. You know, you're building up your skills, you're building up your experiences. You have to understand what it's like. When you work security in a retail store. It could be a grocery store. It could be a fashion designer store. It could be in a shopping mall. It could be in a concert. There's certain things you have to learn and you have to combine to get a better picture. And that's what it's like in this ministry. It's precept upon precept. Yeah, that's what it boils down to. Here a little and there a little. So that's what this ministry helps you with, man. That's what you want. You know, that's Isaiah 28:10. For precept must be upon precept, precept upon precept, line upon line, line upon line, here a little and there a little. So that's one thing that help you cope, with the ups and downs of this society, man. The Lord has given you the information that you need to maintain your psychological balance. It's not as if you're not going to trip and fall, but at least you have an opportunity to get back up. That's just what it boils down to. That's what the Lord wants you to focus on, man. That resiliency. You know, yeah, that's what you want to remember. Yeah, that's all it takes, man. That's all it takes. Yeah, so Proverbs 9:9. Give instruction to a wise man, and he will be yet wiser. Teach a just man, and he will increase in learning. So remember, man, don't take your learning for granted. You have to understand that it's a difficult circumstance. If you want to work, you know that there are certain things that you're trying to prevent from happening to you. You don't want to fall behind on your rent. Nobody wants to be homeless. Certain bills become a priority. So as long as you have the courage, to maintain your employment, you stick with it. You build on it. You build on the opportunity to protect yourself, man. Remember the parable. The man that built his house upon the rock. When the storm and the rain beats upon it, he was standing. All that stuff. So that's what it is. So remember, man, don't get discouraged. You have to put these lessons, these parables. You have to put them to work in your meditations, man. Shalom.